Say some crazy shit. Come on. Stop agreeing with me. Stop giving my intake back to me.
Puberty starts at 8 or 9, or in people with ovaries, 11 or 12 in people with testicles.
But Sargon, haven't you heard of clownfish?
You say that you stand up for women's rights. You say that you protect women, but you exclude trans women.
What bathroom do I use? My own.
Gender-affirming hormones should be used when that child or teenager, adolescent, is ready for the puberty that aligns with their gender identity.
How young?
This person is the hormone expert. This is pseudoscience.
Why am I dancing with that trans person?
We'll see what we'll see what Sargon of Akkad is saying. The confused philosophy of transgenderism. I'm trying to find like takes that are too rich for my blood on the right, because I'm not a right-winger. And in general, there's probably little I agree with Sargon of Akkad on these days, apart from on some of the trans stuff, and probably to an extent to do with things like free speech. So I want to see if I end up agreeing with him on transgenderism. And then, if I do, everyone can call me a right-winger and a voter of the Leopards Eating Faces Party, or whatever the fuck people call me. Bootlicker, that's another one. So this is the confused philosophy of transgenderism. Lotus Eaters Daily. Let's have a look.
So I came across this very interesting clip from Times Radio, where a woman called Helen Webberley, and if we look at her bio, you can see exactly the kind of person we're dealing with. Dr. Helen Webberley, she, her, the hormone expert, international trans rights advocate. Okay, you can see exactly how woke.
She's the founder of Gender GP. But I didn't know the name, I couldn't remember. Like, she, her, even in the thing. Yeah, like this feels like pandering straight away. I don't like this kind of thing. You don't need to pander to me, just exist. That's like, you don't agree with Sargon much anymore. From what I understand, he used to be like a classical liberal. And has kind of more recently gone pretty right, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not even right. I'm like, I lean a bit left, if anything. I'm a liberal. I voted for Labour. And at the moment, I probably would again, you know what I mean?
But international trans rights advocate. Okay, you can see exactly how woke she is. Well, she has a disagreement with Andrew Neil over the nature of gender-confirming surgery and hormonal interventions in the lives of teenagers. And obviously, I don't agree that we should be interceding to interfere with the physical development of teenagers.
Because stuff like that, I agree with that. I think we should wait till they're adults. You can make that kind of adult decision. If you're 12 years old, should you be deciding whether or not you're having your own kids? I don't know about that, man.
Medically, or in any other way, really. But she has a particular view on it that I think is actually very, very revealing to what it is they actually believe, what is being smuggled into the conversation, where they abandon the Bailey and retreat to the Mott. Well, what does the Mott contain within it? Because we can attack that as well. And in fact, we ought to.
People have an orchiectomy and keep the scrotum hanging like a furry tongue. I guess they do. I prefer a deflated balloon myself. Muslims.
And for some reason, Andrew Neil doesn't. So let's watch some of this clip.
Expert, do you support cross-sex hormones for young teenagers?
Gender-affirming hormones should be used when that child or teenager, adolescent, is ready for the puberty that aligns with their gender identity.
How young?
Right. So
that's messed up, man. That's messed up. Aligns with their gender identity. Like, this is pseudoscience. I'm sorry. You can't go through the opposite sex puberty. That doesn't make any sense. If I were to have had puberty blockers, and then instead they gave me like cross-sex hormones, I don't go through a female puberty. I don't become fertile to be able to grow a baby in my womb. I don't have a womb. I don't have ovaries. I'm not going to start getting periods. Already what she's saying makes no sense. This is complete pseudoscience. This is like actually nuts from the off. Like, Jesus fuck. She didn't answer no or yes. No, she says yes. This is a yes answer. I will happily say that whether or not she's like being clear about it, that's a yes answer. She is supportive of giving like these children like these hormones. Absolutely.
Their gender identity.
How young?
Right. So a puberty that aligns with their gender identity. Now, this is a pernicious way of framing anything. And for some reason, Andrew Neil just completely lets this go. And I don't know why, because this is a completely challengeable point. And in fact, one that they would find themselves, if you were to just keep pushing back on it, they would have to come to essentially some kind of metaphysical position, which...
I mean, I do wonder in a sense, is he like... The fact that you're getting someone like this to interview in the first place, maybe he feels like he has to wear the kid gloves. Like, if I'm to play like devil's advocate, maybe that's the case. Maybe he's just not as familiar with this like line of... I don't know how much Andrew Neil has talked about things like trans, you know what I mean?
I don't think holds, and I don't think... I suspect that she is an atheist, and if you could push the argument with her, she'd say, oh yeah, I'm a materialist, obviously. Well, if you push this on a materialist perspective, then she arrives at a position where she's committed to a transcendental metaphysics about the nature of, essentially, the consciousness, or I suppose she would have to say, the soul. When she says a person's the correct gender, or the correct puberty, which aligns with their true gender, that's a very peculiar thing to say, because how would she arrive at that position without committing to something that is outside of the scope of materialism? Because I, as a materialist atheist...
Can we just appreciate this for a second? The hormone expert, founder of Gender GP, is talking about going through the puberty that aligns with your gender. You can only go through one kind of puberty, and that is the puberty for your sex. I went through a male puberty. There was no way on earth I would have been able to go through a female puberty. It's not possible. Like, this person is the hormone expert. This is pseudo-science. It's bullshit. Complete nonsense.
Theist, still, unfortunately, would say that their perspective would have to be that the consciousness is a product of the body, as in the consciousness is developed by the brain, and whatever we call consciousness, whatever that phenomena is, that's something that is not separate to the body, the brain being a part of the body, and doesn't precede the body, and therefore is just downstream of and a product of it. Whereas she is saying that no, the body can be wrong because the consciousness has made a choice. And so essentially the consciousness would have to not be a product of the body for the body to be an inaccurate reflection of the correct gender of the mind. And so the question is, well, how exactly does the mind develop an inaccurate, the true?
I think I get what he's saying. This is the problem. This person is so utterly cooked and talking such utter nonsense that, yeah, I'm probably going to just end up agreeing with Sargon or akkad here. And I hate that I feel like I should or shouldn't agree with one person or another, because I get so much shit and I get called like this, that, and the other. But truthfully, if someone's right about something, they're right about something. And you can argue that if we're saying that you can have a gender identity that occurs naturally somehow and that is different from your actual birth sex, then yeah, you could interpret that as an argument for like a gendered soul or something like that. And these people would push back on that, but mostly just because that's not the actual words that they're using.
Perspective of the...
And the other thing is, we like to separate brain from body, but like, you are the sum total of yourself, ultimately.
True gender of the person. How are these things separate? And she couldn't argue from material grounds, because that would indicate that actually the body being male or female and the mind thinking of itself as a woman rather than a man or a man rather than a woman, whichever the opposite one is in whichever case, that would imply that the person's mind has a problem. And so this would be some kind of mental illness that could be corrected probably via hormone treatments that are in favor, sort of gender, like they call it gender confirmation.
Well, either mental illness or like some kind of supernatural belief, I guess. Which, I mean, again, he's more or less kind of suggesting like it's tantamount to a religious belief, and I kind of see that, to be honest. I'm not buying his argument. Losing your cock doesn't fundamentally change your consciousness. But I think he's arguing that your consciousness is a result of, like, everything you are is a result of the way you already are, like the way your body is, the way you develop, like things like that. I think that's more what it is.
But like, it's not confirmation, it's anti-confirmation.
And the problem is, even if he's talking utter shit, compared to what this person is saying, he's always going to sound better. Like, what she said is like, I'm still a bit shocked, honestly. This is someone, they run something called Gender GP. the hormone expert. You can't go through the opposite sex puberty. That doesn't make any sense. God, what is this? Sorry, I know I'm getting distracted here, but like...
You say that you stand up for women's rights. You say that you protect women, but you exclude trans women. That's not protecting women, it's exclusion dressed up as activism, and it's ugly.
Just say trans women are women. Just do that. That was very stupid. Anyway, I'm losing enough brain cells looking at this person's Twitter. Let's just carry on.
But if you would say, okay, well, if you're a man and you believe you're a woman, if we give you estrogen, you'll feel more womanly. Well, then it stands to reason that if we give you testosterone, you'll feel more manly, and maybe this all goes away.
Yeah, I mean, when you take these kind of things, it's more like confirmation bias, I guess. This is something that a woman creates in her system. Therefore, if I'm taking it, it makes me more like a woman. You know what I mean? It makes me, you know... And I mean hormonally, like, yeah, I guess you'd resemble more the typical woman than the typical man. But does it... I don't know. It's... The kind of consciousness arguments are really quite difficult, honestly. I'm still thinking about this. These people talk about exclusion, meanwhile they pass a homeless person and try their heart out not to look at them. Maybe. I mean, to be clear, I don't know. I don't know very much about Helen Webberley. Give your kids to Dr. Helen. She's a GP. Is she actually? Jeez, I hope not. Fucking bad enough fucking all that Adrian Harrop shit, let alone this person.
And instead of aligning those things, the mind with the body, because again, the mind is a product of the body, so it makes more sense to do that. These people instead want to align the body with the mind. But that implies that the mind is separate and superior to the body. And if you drill them back, I've seen them say regularly just the words, this person was born in the wrong body. So, okay, well, how could that be the case?
Supposedly that's a metaphor. I'm losing my ability to believe that. People mean that literally now. People earnestly believe that kind of thing, and that's wrong. You shouldn't be leading people to believe stuff that is just fundamentally not possible.
If the body and the mind, from a materialist perspective, are one and the same, and the mind is a product of the body, how is it that a person is born in the wrong body? You have to presume that there was a person prior to their body. And now we have a series of metaphysical commitments that put it in the realm of religion. We would have to say, oh, well, that's the soul then? Because obviously it's not the consciousness, because the consciousness is very definitely a product of the mind, scientifically speaking, from a materialist perspective. And just from their own perspective, they surely wouldn't say the mind was some free-floating entity, and so they would have to call it a soul. And now we are having a religious discussion. And so she has smuggled in a bunch of religious priors into this conversation where they're not applicable. But also what this reveals to us is the very conversation, the very notion of transgenderism. It relies on religious foundations while masquerading as a science. And
well, it relies on pseudo-science. It relies on, do I want to say supernatural kind of things? I don't know. Certainly things beyond the realm of what science understands, for sure.
And so we aren't dealing with the same thing. And Andrew Neil could have caught this, I think. But I mean, he's getting on a bit, so maybe he wouldn't. But anyway, so...
The mind is superior to the body. Well, aren't you just your mind and body? Aren't you just you? A person in a vegetative state is not superior to someone who has lost all their senses and limbs. I don't know what you mean by superior, to be honest. I mean... I'm not sure. I'll think more about that.
So this whole thing, this is very revealing. Let's carry on with that in mind.
Young, would you say that could
Well,
be?
puberty starts at 8 or 9, or in people with ovaries, 11 or 12 in people with testicles.
So
people with ovaries and people with testicles. Ugh, I hate it. Who wants this? Who wants to listen to someone talk this way? No one wants all of this like gender neutral language. No one wants this. I'm sorry. It's over. Why are we still doing this? This person just sounds deranged to me.
in girls, it happens earlier than in boys. That's just the normal everyday language we could use, and it would be completely accurate and everyone would know what we're talking about.
So, but at that time, it's up to that child. How emotionally ready are they to undertake the puberty of...
Emotionally ready. And by the way, what we're talking about is you're not going to be able to have your own kids. Puberty starts at 8, what the fuck? I think maybe it can in like girls. Average age is 11. It can be 4. It can be like sooner than that. 8 to 13, 8 to 13, 8 to 13. Yeah, I guess so. Hang on.
The normal everyday language we could use, and it would be completely accurate and everyone would know what we're talking about.
So, but at that time, it's up to that child. How emotionally ready are
Like, how emotionally ready a child is to go through the opposite sex puberty. First off, that's not possible. Second off, what they're doing, potentially at the age of 8, is making a decision that they're never going to have their own children. That potentially, even if they come out of it and they can have their own children, they're not going to be able to like breastfeed them maybe, because they might have had like a mastectomy by then. The age of 8, I'm sorry, that is too young to be making this kind of decision. I just don't think the average 8-year-old has that kind of concept of like permanence and understands the like, ramifications of changing your body that much. Like, you've got the rest of your life to realize it was a mistake. And by the time you do, what have you already gone through? What have you already changed? Lose a bunch of your hair, like your voice is deepened in a way that might give you dysphoria. The thing is, you might go through some of the steps of transition and then get gender dysphoria because you realize that like, that wasn't right for you. And there was some other reason as to why you were feeling that way. Like this person, I think this person is crazy, to be clear. Like this Helen Webberley person is absolutely crazy.
they to undertake the puberty of?
You're not old enough to consent to everything else. You aren't old enough to consent to medicalization. Yeah, that's the thing. Like an 8-year-old can't consent to consuming alcohol. An 8-year-old can't smoke. An 8-year-old can't get a tattoo. But they can decide to transition, decide to go through the puberty of the other sex, even though that's not possible. Oh man, oh, this is rough. This is actually rough.
Their real gender rather than their birth gender.
Right, that's fascinating.
Real gender isn't a thing either. Gender is not a biological concept. Gender is like a social concept. There is no innate gender. There is no real gender. A person doesn't have a gender. They have their sex. And then things are gendered. Gender being the social and cultural aspects of sex. Without sex, gender wouldn't exist.
Isn't it? Right? No one gets to decide when they're emotionally ready to go through puberty. They go through puberty. There is only one puberty that each person goes through, right?
Listen, this is going to be very easy, to be honest. Like, I want to find where I kind of disagree and where I draw the line with the right on this kind of issue, and with gender criticals and other things like that. But this is going to be a bit too easy because this Helen Webberley person is actually nuts. Like, this is crazy. The shit she's saying is unbelievable to me.
The act of your body changing from a child to an adult is something you do.
What do you mean it's impossible to go through the opposite sex's puberty? I thought that was what hormones do. Well, when a girl goes through puberty, she starts her period. Like, she starts to become fertile to be able to, like, have children. You know what I mean? How can a male do that? A male taking estrogen does not get a period. A male doesn't have any ovaries. A male doesn't have a womb lining to develop. Any of that kind of stuff. If it's a female taking testosterone, their balls aren't going to drop because they don't have any balls. Stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like the function of puberty is that you become fertile. You move towards becoming an adult. You can't do that on the other side. You know what I mean? Sargon doesn't really make videos on worthy opponents. Yeah, that's very possible. A lot of people don't, to be fair. Adding spirituality into science. Yeah, I guess that's what, like, Sargon's argument is, and you could certainly spin it that way. Me personally, like, I don't think I'd focus too much on how it comes off, like, religious. I'd rather just focus on, like, quite plainly, how can a male go through a female puberty? That is just not possible. Difference is normal puberty doesn't take things away.
You don't or normally have control over, happens whether you're ready for it or not, and happens only in one direction.
Yeah, you know what's funny about all the genocide shit? You're more likely to be able to use like transition to genocide people than to have them be genocided, because you're sterilizing yourself necessarily. Like it's really crazy, man. It's really crazy. I don't know what happens in your life to get you this like convinced of this nonsense.
And so what she's saying is what we want is to medically intercede in that and create an artificial simulacrum of a puberty. There isn't a...
Well, not even that. You can't. None of it is possible. Yeah, you'll get facial hair if you're a female and you take testosterone. But facial hair isn't the primary function of male puberty. It's like your balls dropping. It's like sperm production. The same with female puberty. Like growing tits isn't the primary function. I guess it's one of them because, you know, you've got to have something to feed your child with. But ultimately it's about like fertility. It's about, you know, you'll begin your period, stuff like that. You can't do that. And a male won't produce milk either unless they take a certain drug that makes you do that.
A different puberty. There aren't different kinds of puberties. There's you as an individual will have one puberty and you will go through it, assuming that no one intercedes in it, and it will...
Yeah, this is really annoying, actually. I'm just going to agree with him on everything, for fuck's sake. I will find something. I will find stuff that is too rich for my blood. And I'm sure I watch stuff sometimes that goes too far for me. I almost, like he's just saying all the same stuff I am. This is really annoying, actually. I'm disappointed. Like, this Helen Webberley person is so crazy. I don't think that I agree with Sargon on very much in general. But something like this is like it's just obvious. Like, what else am I going to think? Like, this is nuts.
Do the things that it does to your body, whether you like it or not, and it will only do these things, and these are irreversible. And what she's saying is, well, we can use science to intercept that, stop this from happening, and then create a kind of artificial simulacrum of a puberty. It's something that isn't what your puberty was going to do, but will mimic someone else's puberty.
Yeah, Jen, were you emotionally ready to go through your puberty? Because you got to make sure you're emotionally ready before you go through puberty.
In you, as if that's something that's going to just have no downstream side effects and negative consequences, right? So that's interesting. But notice how she frames it. It's like, well, there's your biological puberty, or your physical, the puberty that you didn't choose, that was inflicted upon you by nature.
But what about second puberty?
And then the real puberty. So again, how would you find an objective standard to describe the real puberty? Well, she doesn't appear to have one. She only appears to have...
Here's the objective standard. Someone says that they are this gender identity, therefore they are at that gender identity objectively.
The subjective, this teenager is telling me they feel like they're trapped in the wrong body or born in the wrong body, whatever it is. And okay, well, that's just a subjective metric. And we know that can be changed through the use of hormones, actually. So it's not like we can agree on that. So she would have to appeal to something, again, transcendent, like some kind of form or something like a...
Yeah, exactly, Mischief. Say some crazy shit. Come on. Stop agreeing with me. Stop giving my own take back to me. I beg you. I beg you.
Plato's form, where it was something that was eternal and outside of material reality, that decides somehow that this is the real gender of the person, or the real puberty they should be going through, rather than the fake puberty that is the biological reality in the real world. Like, that is, again, she's arriving at a transcendent and what is essentially just a religious perspective. Like, how does she come to this? And Andrew Neil doesn't challenge her on this, which is very frustrating, because this is a completely open goal as far as I'm concerned. It's a massive weakness in the philosophy of transgenderism. How does she explain this? And the answer is she can't. She hasn't got a holy book or anything. She hasn't got a philosophical backing that would inform and argue for what she's saying. It's just being taken as a given that there is a real, and again, ontologically, how would you come to this conclusion?
Yeah. Did any of you actually consent to going through puberty? That's the real question. I think a lot of you all should be suing your parents for having you in a way that you went through a puberty you didn't consent to be going through. I should sue my parents for me coming out male, quite frankly.
How would you back this up? Like, how would you understand? Epistemologically, how do we know this? Is it just because some young person says so? Or how do we know that person doesn't have a mental illness? How do we know that there isn't something wrong with them, actually? How do we know that that's the correct thing? And of course, she can't answer any of these questions. She just, and the thing is, she wouldn't be able to. And she doesn't have to, because Andrew...
What do I most often disagree with gender criticals about? In general, I tend to agree with their perspectives. I'll think about that. I normally, when I hear something, I kind of know, if that makes sense. And like, you get some, like the way that they talk about trans people, I think I'm more likely to disagree. Like, some of them go too far about stuff, I guess. You know, things like generalizations, like stupid shit that people say. I'd have to see some stuff, you know what I mean? You don't need to believe in the soul or some other BS to be trans. He's not quite saying that. I don't think he's saying you have to be trans. I think he's saying you have to... He's talking about what Helen Webberley is talking about. Helen Webberley is talking about the idea that you can have a real gender as opposed to your sex and go through the wrong puberty and there being a right puberty you should have. I don't think he's ever said you have to believe in the soul in order to be trans. And he's talking about like the transgender like philosophy. Like, this is all stuff, what they're saying, that I disagree with. Because to me, I'm still a male. I've never, you know, certainly since I've been on my channel, I don't go around saying that I'm actually a woman, really. Like, he's talking about the specific kind of stuff that Helen Webberley and plenty of other people espouse. I don't think he's saying this is necessary to be trans, if that makes sense. Have I ever seen or heard of Per Joseph? Yeah, I watched the Jack Jewel thing. He was really interesting.
Niels lets it go and goes, well, okay, but is this going to be bad for them? Obviously, it's not going to have great consequences. If we're in this position in the first place, something has clearly gone wrong. And so the question is, how do we deal with these things? And we have what is essentially a religious lunatic who's saying, well, the child's soul was born in the wrong body, and there is this platonic form of their real gender that exists somewhere in the ether, and I want to manifest that in reality. It's like, okay, but I don't agree with any of that. I think you're mental, and I think that this poor kid...
I think one thing I might disagree with the gender critical on is that I don't really see all that much harm in general from like trans women using like women's public toilets. That might be an example. And like with spaces, they have to be kind of treated separately, in my opinion. You can't just one size fits all, because there's different levels to it. A women's prison and a women's like public bathroom are very different places. So there should be different standards, you know what I mean? What bathroom do I use? My own.
Kid is just, I mean, who knows what the reason they've come to us. But I think actually we need to be making them understand.
I used to use the women's, now I just don't really use public facilities because, I don't know, not really worth the hassle.
That their mind and body are a product of the same thing, and actually making them understand that this is their only body. They'll only ever get one, and they'll only ever go through one puberty. And so making them come to terms with the thing that they actually are might actually be better for their mental health in the long run than some kind of weird scientific experiment that creates a simulacrum of a puberty that isn't reversible, that has negative consequences they never want to talk about, and that will saddle them with...
Yeah, like in general conversation, you can say you're a woman, not in any scientific or legal sense. I guess. I mean, there's the argument that even that at all is like... Even that at all is like normalizing a kind of delusional state. I mean, I don't think it really... There's not really much harm from what you're saying, I guess. You know what I mean?
Very life-changing events and like changes going forward. Like, it will make them infertile, for example, right? So, and it's, most teenagers aren't like, oh yeah, I really want kids. Most teenagers are like, I want to go out and get drunk, right? But when they reach about 30, suddenly your life changing, like, yeah, no, I don't want to go get drunk anymore. I would actually like to have kids now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with this. Where do we... oh well, we'll just...
And that will be off the table for them. So asking them to make such a dramatic decision when they're 14 or something like that, or 12 or whatever she was saying, that's totally irresponsible. We shouldn't be doing this.
But that is the bit that certainly isn't reversible. And so you're letting kids, and let's call them kids, age 10, 11, take prescription, take medication, which is irreversible.
Well,
that's right, isn't it?
The changes of puberty are irreversible. And actually, if a cisgender...
The changes of puberty are irreversible, but that's like natural. That's what happens. And you only get one anyway. What happens if you never go through puberty? What's the effects of never going through puberty, you know? I feel like there's only so much we understand about that kind of thing.
A child, a child that's not transgender, if they get to 14 and they haven't started puberty yet, we as doctors start getting very worried about that. And transgender children are no different. We need them to be in puberty with their peers, with their friends.
But they're not going through puberty. What are you talking about?
Experiencing those body changes, the body development, they need to be doing that in line with everybody.
The child seat changed them.
Right, so imagine thinking that. There's no difference between a cisgender person and a transgender person. Okay, but there's no difference. Why do we have this massive psychological and medical apparatus to steward them, to make them arrive at a particular endpoint that otherwise naturally they wouldn't have arrived at? There is obviously a massive difference. And the thing is, the phenomenon of transgenderism is an artificial thing. This isn't what the body naturally does. This is something we are doing, again, to intercede into natural processes.
But Sargon, haven't you heard of clownfish? What about male chickens that have like a cloaca? Bigots.
For reasons that I think are highly dubious. And it's not that these children don't, and people who feel this way don't deserve empathy or anything like that. Yeah, no, they absolutely do. They have a problem, right? And the question is, how do we help that person?
I mean, if I'm gonna at least try and find some kind of disagreement, people aren't necessarily gonna take it too kindly, kind of suggesting they have a problem. But I don't know, gender dysphoria is it is what it is, right? Dysphoria, suggests a problem. And we word all this stuff around making it not sound like a mental illness, but is that honest? I don't know.
And I think this person is not helping at all. I think they're going in the complete opposite direction to helping. And actually they're going to saddle them with lifelong medical expenses, lifelong medical problems.
As an autistic person, I notice people use imprecise language for simplicity all the time, so maybe I see less of a problem with it than most. Yeah, I mean, it's not, you go around calling yourself a woman, like, it does depend on what's going on the inside, and you don't know in any one person. Like, it's not the end of the world, for sure. I'll definitely grant that. Like, a trans woman calling themselves a woman occasionally, like, I guess it's fine. I mean, when you're doing it on YouTube and you're talking about stuff, I think it's a bit different. But like in just normal life, like, yeah, it's not really the end of the world. And I don't really think the average trans woman using the women's bathroom is the end of the world either. But I do also understand that I'm not female myself. And I can see why people would kind of balk at that. So it's a difficult one. But then, like I said, with spaces, you should treat them all differently because there's different levels of severity, even between like bathrooms and locker rooms. You know what I mean? Gender GP is very pricey. I'm sure it is. Do they still run? I'm sure I heard something about, was it Gender GP that got in trouble? I still exist. I've looked at this before. Holy shit. So as a member, £30 monthly, along with almost 200 setup fee. Setup fee, $195 monthly membership, book your consultation. A lot of money. I mean, hey, it's capitalism. You gotta make money somehow. Some people sell clothes. Some people sell hormones to children.
Problems. They're going to completely warp the potential course of their life into a place that may well have made sense to a 15-year-old who's been propagandized by TikTok or something, but won't make any sense to someone who becomes a mature adult and actually wants to move into the next stage of their life as an adult, take on the functions of an adult, which is having children and raising them. Like, this is madness. This is not going to end well.
Mind, before it was too late. It was a lucky escape from the prescriptions from you.
Child C was a boy, and Child C, was given puberty blockers. And the great thing about puberty blockers before hormones is it gives you a chance to see what's going to happen. It gives you
Overwhelmingly, if someone's on puberty blockers for like trans stuff, especially if they're being socially transitioned, which they almost definitely will be, they're going to go on to the next step. And the more steps you go on, the less reversible it becomes. You know what I mean? And even puberty blockers, like, I'm pretty sure they're quite reluctant sometimes to give them to like precocious puberty cases. Because sometimes it's less harmful to just let them go through puberty too early. And we ran around saying that puberty blockers are completely reversible. It's not true. It's just not true. I mean, if you're a puberty blockers case, your genitals won't develop properly. You'll have to like get a different kind of surgery to if you're post-puberty, where you get like the penile inversion, you know what I mean? A lot of different effects. And it's, to an extent, I think long-term, it's quite poorly understood.
pause. It gives you time, which is what Child C benefited from greatly. We don't know where Child C is now. And the fact that Child C was able to say, can you pause my puberty? And then, actually, I'm not sure. And then, can you pause it again? Is really...
I don't know. I think women should be allowed to use the men's room if they please. I mean, occasionally it happens. Like, I went to see Radiohead once when I was like 17. And like the queue for the women's was so much longer. These two women that were stood like near me when I was waiting to use the men's, which was much shorter, They point at me, they're like, oh, that guy's got long hair, let's just follow him. I'm like, well, I don't give a fuck. Everyone's just there to use the toilet. They want to go back and watch the fucking gig, don't they?
Really important.
If she really
Right, that's fascinating. Because remember, all of this philosophy is predicated on the supremacy of the will over everything. Nobody gets to pause their own puberty. Oh, I'm not ready for it. So what? You will change. Your mind will change. You will mature. This is what maturity is when we talk.
Yeah, I think I would like to see a good argument for like pausing someone's puberty in any case, beyond it being precocious puberty. They're going through it too soon. I don't think everyone should have the opportunity to pause their puberty. I don't see what help that would be. Like, you have to go through it ultimately. So, like, I don't know. How would we make an argument for, like, so-called cisgender people pausing their puberty because they're not emotionally ready for it yet? Is that really a good idea? Should we really normalize something like that? It's a really strange one.
Talk about a person emotionally maturing, intellectually maturing. Your mind will change. Saying, oh, wait, I want to stop this, and therefore we're going to concede. And look at the way you say, oh, well, this was very beneficial to child C. We don't know where they are now. Well, then how do you know it's beneficial? How do you know this has been?
Yeah, another problem. A lot of data doesn't really get followed up on properly. A lot of studies on like trans people that find like beneficial results. There's not really much follow-up. It's a common problem, unfortunately.
A long-term benefit to that person. How do you know what kind of mental state they're in now? How do you know what the consequences of these things were? Like, you don't know this. She's just assuming this because she wants this to be the case. And again, what we're doing is...
I know she probably has data, but how good is that data? I mean, I don't know if he's read the cast review. An awful lot. Well, there is some data at least that supports things like what she's talking about, but how good it is not great. And the problem is, with a lot of like science behind like trans stuff, studies don't tend to agree with each other very often. You'll have some that find one thing and have some that find another thing. And really what it means to me is that your mileage is going to vary heavily. And to me, that goes against like the idea of letting kids transition. Because the results in the study, they're too mixed. I think a more pertinent question is, how long can someone safely pause their puberty? Don't they normally say it's about 2 years or so? I mean, don't cause permanent physical change. They can. When you take it for a few years, everyone is different. And then they go on to hormones. I guess you should... I think after a few years, like... See, I'm very suspicious of any claims that this is completely irreversible. I don't really think you can stop puberty and then just like... You just start again after a couple of years and it's just normal. I don't know about that. And you can get all kinds of things like bone density issues is a big one. Lack of growth, you know, your genitalia doesn't grow properly. I mean, possible side effects. Yeah, bone growth, bone density, fertility. And I can't remember. I'm sure there is like a certain amount of time at which it begins to get actually quite unsafe, but I can't remember too well. Not enough research on how long it'd be safely done. Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of it's based on like the Dutch protocol and stuff, like, and that study hasn't been easily replicated in terms of its findings. I don't know. Everything I see just is like, why are we doing this? You'd need to get this like down so much more than we have for me to even think that this might be worthwhile. Like, this is not good. And we know little, I think, about like what kind of lifespan a person has if they blocked puberty and then went on to the other sex hormones. Like, are we cutting years off these people's lives? Like, how much do we actually know about this? Jesus Christ. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Is something that is not only not natural, but not necessarily good for them. No, you have to deal with the way that your body changes on its time, not on your time. And what this does, it gives you a certain level of humility. You understand, and you're forced to understand, that there are some things just outside of your control that you don't get to choose. You don't get to say, I don't consent to this. No, it's going to happen anyway. So what does that mean? You have to change. You have to become adaptable. You have to become flexible. You have to mature. You have to understand your place in the world and the way that the world...
Sounds like we better not do it, and in 99% of cases, better safe than sorry. Yeah, I'd agree. And it's like weighing up. Some of these people have mental health issues because of like gender identity and stuff, but it's, I don't know, there isn't really that much evidence of this epidemic of like young people killing themselves because they can't access this kind of thing. And like lots of kids aren't able to, like in the UK, for example, because there's like waiting lists and they're long as fuck. And I don't think that many people are willing to work in this field, honestly. It's probably a nightmare. So I don't know, man.
World will act on you in relation to what you are. And then you can see from this place, right, what can I do in response to this? Rather than arrest that entire process and try and say, no, my mind will have total control of everything in the world all around it. That turns you into a kind of weirdo. Right? That turns you into a person who has demented expectations on what it should be like to be a person in the world. And you can see from this perspective how they become insanely radical and say, no, everything around me is bad and has to change. No, everything around you is fine. It was always this way and it's always going to be this way. And it's only this bizarre standard you've set up that my mind must never be inconvenienced and never not have a choice that is the problem. Like, this is just normal. People have issues where they have to go through something they didn't choose. Yeah, that's normal. That's complete.
Yeah, as the boss, listen, I'll find something that's a better example of what I'm trying to square in my head, you know? Because I don't fall completely on one side or the other. But then with trans kids, I just think it's unconscionable. I don't think we have anywhere near the kind of data or like science required on our side to say that this is a good idea. Yeah, I don't know. There we go. Helen Webberley is insane. I more or less have been agreeing with Sargon, I guess, here. So it is what it is. Rather be honest than pretend that I disagree with someone just because it's politically convenient or something.